You're listening to Autistic Viewpoints with Turrell, Burgess, and Daria Brown, where we talk about our past and present autistic experiences and much more.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to episode 4 of Autistic Viewpoints. And if you've been with us since the beginning, welcome back to another episode. If this is your first time here, then welcome. We're excited to have you. My name is Turrell Burgess.
And I'm Daria Brown.
So if you've seen our last episode, then you knew this episode was coming. Today, we have a very special guest. Her name is Dr. Angela Kingdon, and she is the host of the Autistic Culture Podcast. A great podcast if you haven't heard it yet. I strongly recommend it.
And today our topic is masking. And this is a very interesting episode for me because I was just diagnosed as autistic a little over a year ago. Turrell was diagnosed at age 3. Yet neither one of us really has awareness about our masking. And we've sort of both, it's sort of a new term to both of us. And certainly in the last year, I've read a lot about it, but still trying to figure out how I mask. And it's a new topic to Turrell as well. And Angela, you have so much experience in this. So who better to talk about masking than you, because you've talked about it so much on your podcasts. And I've loved listening to your journey.
So yeah, it is such an interesting topic. I'm excited when you asked me to talk about this. I was like, oh, I'm always talking about like autistic TV show characters or autistic musicians. And I'm like, oh, I love this topic. I never get asked to talk about this. But I did I just did a master's degree. And my research was on the validity of self-diagnosis compared to medical diagnosis. And one of the things that I was asking my advisor about was, before we look at the results of these for our research, should we ask them to do a CAT-Q? Should we ask them to do the masking quiz that most people know? You can find it. I know you guys did it, so we're going to talk about your scores. You can find it anywhere, but I always find it on Embrace Autism, so embrace-autism.com. So I bring this up with my professor who's done like a million studies on autism. And she was like, the what? And I'm like, the CAT-Q. I'm like, the camouflaging test. And she's like, the what now? And I'm like, this is not, I think if you're in autistic circles, you hear the word masking a lot, but really it is underexplored and under-discussed. And it's one of the reasons why people who self-diagnose often don't believe it. And people who go for a medical diagnosis and are told, oh, you make eye contact, you can't be autistic, why they're dismissed. Masking is essentially covering up our autistic traits. So if you are trying to assess someone or yourself for autism and you don't know what masking is and you haven't taken the CAT-Q, you cannot successfully identify whether you or anyone you're talking to is autistic, because they could be really good at faking it. And many of us become very good at faking it. That's why so many autistic people are actors, because in a way, camouflaging is a big piece of, like you memorize what everyone's doing, you memorize the script, you write the script, you perform the role. You're like, this is how a human acts. Let me act human. Am I smiling human? Am I human?
And it's interesting, on my own podcast, on the We Chose Play podcast from Affect Autism, I interviewed Mickey Rowe, who's a self-advocate who spoke at our ICDL conference. And he talked about how he loved going to the theater with his grandmother in Seattle as a kid. And he felt there totally at home. And when he became an actor, it was so easy for him because he would memorize the script and he could perform and everything. There was no huge, weird social demands that were so awkward for him at school. So I get that 100%.
Yeah, camouflaging or masking, and I have heard people say they're slightly different, but they are just survival skills. They are We are going to do that. Whether you are diagnosed at 3 or diagnosed at 39 or never diagnosed, when you are autistic, living in a world that is majority non-autistic, you are going to develop ways to just survive the day. And those are going to look a lot like masking. And then if you are assessing the mask as a friend or as a medical professional, you're not really, I think, assessing the real person. How do you know if you're in love with this person if they don't know who they are? How do you know if you want to be friends with this person if they're pretending to be someone you might like to be friends with?
Now, I'll bring up a point that I brought up in my, again, the other podcast I do. I did an episode with Kieran Rose and Dr. Amy Pearson on their book, Autistic Masking. And this was definitely early on before I knew as much as I know now about masking, which is still not very much. And in that podcast, we talked about, and as many other places have discussed, everybody masks. It's a human trait to mask. That's not specifically autistic, because when you're dating, and because I was separated 3.5 years ago, believe me, I read all the marriage and couples therapy research stuff from the Gottmans and everything during the time that my marriage
Did
was
it? Me too. Yeah.
And so, there's the honeymoon period is 2 years. And I thought back to a lot of my early relationships, and yep, sure enough, after about 1.5 to 2 years, they all sort of dissolved. And then either you just sort of stick with it and put up with it until eventually someone breaks up with the other, or you just end it. Or if you have a child, you sort of stay. But it's rare that that spark and that great connection and love remains past that honeymoon stage unless you have that solid relationship with each other. And so I think of those first 2 years as masking. And whenever I hear couples, sorry for couples that are out there, when they meet people, I always think, yeah, whatever, get back to me in 2+ years, because then we'll see if you're still together, right? So that to me is like kind of conscious masking. And Turrell's laughing because now if you start dating and I'll be like, wait 2 years, Turrell. I don't want anyone to feel that kind of pressure. I'm just kind of being tongue in cheek, but that's what I was thinking in my head, and that's what resonated with me with my experience. So when I think about it in that sense, I think, and of course I have a master's in personality psychology, and so I was always noticing the personalities that I would date. And so, people that I would date in my 20s and 30s and all of that, like I had my child when I was almost 39. So I had a lot of dating experience. Like there were different personality types. And with people who were more domineering, I masked to the nines. And with people that were more submissive than me, I was more the person that possibly made them mask. And it's because you're trying so hard to make a relationship work. You want it to work. And, now I'm finally in a relationship for over 3 years where neither one of us mask, and I've met the match that is the best for me. And, it happened over age of 50, but what are you going to do? So that's kind of a side note to this whole masking idea.
Well, I'm curious how, because you took the CAT-Q, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how
Yes.
did you do? Did you win?
Okay.
What'd you get?
So Turrell, first, before we talk about our results, do you have any thoughts so far? Because Angela and I both did a lot of talking, and you just listened.
Especially after taking the CAT-Q, I realized, how many times I try to hide the fact that I'm autistic, but then obviously, especially now, I'm obviously a lot more comfortable because I will admit at the time, listen, young Turrell was confused and didn't really know how to feel when it came to being like the only autistic child in his class. And so like I really didn't know what to do because I was trying so hard just to fit in. I think that's why, when I did that survey and answered the questions the way I did, I was like, wow, I definitely did a lot of masking, and I didn't even know. Like, I wasn't familiar with this term until a few years ago. This is literally what I was doing growing up. And, I just, obviously, once I reached a certain age, I believe around like 14-ish, no, 13 or 14-ish, I basically stopped caring how people feel about me. I was just like, you know what? I'm just gonna be myself. They're not gonna like you if you're not being yourself. So just be yourself. So basically, taking that cat cue basically just brought back all those emotions because I'm like, I did a lot of masking when I was younger. I didn't even know it.
Well, on that note, let's jump into it. And I am going to share my screen. So this is embrace-autism.com, as Angela said, and it's /cat-q. And it officially stands for the Camouflaging Autistic Traits Questionnaire. And I was surprised that you said, Angela, the person you worked with didn't know what it was, because psychologists that are colleagues of mine definitely knew what it was. And that's interesting for one. But the CAT-Q is a self-report measure of social camouflaging behaviors in adults. And it has 3 subtests. So for those that are listening on audio, I am showing the website, and you can see this on YouTube or Spotify or anywhere else you might get this video version of the podcast. But the 3 subcategories of this CAT-Q are compensation, masking, and assimilation. So compensation is strategies used to actively compensate for difficulties in social situations. So you might copy the friend's body language or facial expressions, learn social cues from movies and books. And I've heard a lot of autistic people say that that's where they learned a lot, from watching movies and books. Interestingly enough, I did not score autistic on this subcategory. It's the other 2 categories that I scored high. And masking is strategies used to hide autistic characteristics or portray a non-autistic persona. For examples, adjusting face and body to appear confident and or relaxed and forcing eye contact. This definitely is totally me, inside and out. I'm doing it all the time as a default. This is the one that you also scored autistic on, right? Right, Turrell?
And when you're saying scored autistic, what do you mean by that phrase? Are you saying...
So we scored in line with the average or higher than autistic average, which is higher than the neurotypical average. So both Turrell and I scored autistic or whatever, we mask. And then the 3rd category is assimilation, strategies used to fit in with others socially in social situations. So putting on an act, avoiding or forcing interactions with others. And I scored very high in this. And interestingly, Turrell scored low in this. So Turrell only does compensation and masking, but not assimilation. Whereas I do not do compensation, but I do masking and assimilation. And then if you go to a different part of the website called Interpret Your CAT-Q Scores, and it's linked on the page that we were just looking at, it describes the 3 subtypes. And I'm just scrolling down for those listening on audio.
I'm curious.
Where it shows you the average female score, the average male score, the average non-binary score, and then for neurotypicals, the average score, and for autistic neurotypical differences. So you can compare your results to the averages.
Right. So it's interesting. It's interesting how you are looking at these scores. It's very different from how I think of it. So what were your overall scores?
Mine was a 101.
Yours was 101. And what was yours, Daria?
So I scored a 92 overall.
Which is on the low side.
On compensation, the average autistic male score is 36, and Turrell got 40. The average female score is 41, and I only got 18. That's the one that I did not score on. But in masking, the male average is 32.9. Turrell got 41. The average female score is 37.87. I got 39. And then on the assimilation subscale, the average autistic male gets 39.93. Turrell only got 20. But on the female average, look at how much higher the females are than males. Females on assimilation got 44.6 and I got 35. So lower than the autistic average, but higher than the neurotypical at 29 average. Anyway, just some interesting numbers. That's how we scored. It's interesting because, again, if we talk about what camouflaging is, what masking is, what assimilation is, there certainly can be sex differences. And when I say sex differences, I'm talking about stereotypically female and stereotypically male. And of course, we know that probably 50% of autistic people are gender fluid or non-binary.
I think it is very difficult to assess your masking with this particular assessment because they're really asking 3 questions, which isn't the way a lot of people mask. So one is like, do you copy people? Do you script? Are you always observing people and then trying to copy them, right? That is not the only way to mask. Like that's one of the 3 subscales that they're looking at. So where I would go with this is just approaching it from a completely different angle. No matter what the assessment said, do you feel like, and I know these questions are on there, but do you feel like yourself or do you feel like you're on or you're performing? Whatever the way they describe it, like, don't worry about the question so much, but like, I'm just asking both of you, Daria, starting with you, like, are you somebody who feels like you're kind of what Turrell was saying earlier? Like at some point I was just like, I'm going to be myself, whether people like it or not. Like, do you feel like yourself or do you feel like you're performing?
Interesting, because I feel like I always do what I want, but interpersonally, I constantly mask.
So if we were just having coffee, or better yet, if you were at a work meeting, would you be playing the role of Daria at work?
Absolutely.
Right. So sometimes, in general, I think autistic people on multiple choice questions, we can struggle because we're like, do you write a script? I don't know. I don't have a pen and paper. I don't type it out. I don't use Final Cut Pro. What do you mean by script? Is this a script? Like what? Like,
or
so
on personality tests that I would take, it's like, well, in what context? Like extrovert,
right.
I like going to parties. Well, what kind of party? With who? Where?
Right. One
totally
of them is
depends.
like, do you like going to museums or the theater better? And I'm like, what's
Depends.
the play? How, yeah, like, where is the museum? Is it like a foreign language opera? Like, what are we talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, for me, is it an art museum? 100% museum. But Angela, just interesting, like, if we're so unconscious about how we mask, what steps do you even take? How do you realize that you were masking so hard? I mean, for you, it came to burnout. I guess that's what made you realize that you were masking. Or like, how did you get to that point where you were like, okay, I'm masking and I don't want to do this anymore?
Yeah. Well, for me, I think my approach was a little more that where when Turrell mentioned earlier at some point, he was like, hey, I'm just going to be myself. I grew up undiagnosed. I was in some category of weird. So it was eccentric. Like it was always like, oh, that's just Angela. Angela's just weird. Angela's dramatic. That like, so the expectation was that I wasn't going to act like everyone. And the results were like matched up with that. Like I didn't have great results all the time in like friendships and social situations because I was seen as weird, but I didn't even really get there was another option. So I wasn't scripting. I wasn't observing other people and acting like them. I wasn't monitoring my own behavior. I wasn't doing any of that stuff. And then when I got diagnosed, I started therapy. So I got diagnosed, I got a little packet. My psychiatrist said there's not, there's no medicine for this, because I was like, what's the prescription? Make it go away, whatever it is. Like, give me the drugs. And he's like, no, but what we recommend is therapy. And so I went to a cognitive behavioral therapist, which as an adult is the gold standard. As a kid, it's often ABA, but the adult version of that is still a different kind of behavioralism. And I had a great therapist, and she basically explained to me how to act normal. She was, in not so many words, was like, hey, you're really fucking weird. Here's how normal people act. So I remember there's a couple times that stand out, but one of them was I was at work, and where my desk was, there was a guy who was in the cold room. It was the NOC, the Network Operations Center. It was super cold, and the guy did something in there. I don't know. He was the guy we went to for our email and stuff. But the duct work from the cold room went to my room, and he whistled all day long. And I literally lost my mind. Turrell is whistling. That was not for me. And I lost my mind. And I'm sure he was probably autistic. I don't know. He was just verbally stimming, but it was it would drive me crazy. Now, the correct answer was get headphones. I have no idea why not a person suggested to me get headphones. So every day I would go in the cold room, and then I would scream at him. And then I would be cold all day because I went in the cold room, because I can't moderate my temperature. So I was freezing in my room, and I was angry all the time. And then I was having complete meltdowns at work. And then I told my therapist, because I was I think I got written up at work because I almost got into a fist fight with this guy who wouldn't stop whistling. And she was like, you don't get to tell people if they whistle or not. And I'm like, oh no, I for sure do. It's bothering everyone. And she's like, no, here's how you behave. And it sounded so right to me. No one had ever told me. What people told me is don't be so confrontational. Don't be so opinionated. Don't be so defensive. But nobody told me it doesn't matter how much people annoy you with noises they make. You can't tell them anything about their behavior. You can only control your own behavior. And then she told me exactly how to act. And then I copied what she told me and got a promotion. And then there was the next thing. There was a thing at the gym. I won't go into all of them, but I noticed when I acted exactly how she told me, I would get things. I would get drinks and promotions and free t-shirts instead of kicked out and ostracized and shut. And I was like, this is fascinating. And so I literally learned from CBT as an adult. I was diagnosed at 39. And I learned from the time I was 39 till I was 46 how to mask. And in that time, I went from really struggling. I never was able to keep a job. My income was really inconsistent, to becoming a millionaire. I made literally millions of dollars. People loved me. I had so many friends. Everyone wanted to be with me. I was always throwing parties. I lost weight. I had the best, because she told me what to eat. So I just ate what my therapist told me. It was a little bit of a cult.
You essentially dove in as a special interest.
It became my special interest how to act like the regular people. And I was like, this would be so nice if this is who I was. I think I'll just pretend this is who I am. And then the weirdest thing happened, which is, with one exception, my family was finally nice to me. My family, I always annoyed my family. It was Angela will never stop singing. You can't talk to Angela. She'll always argue. I drove them crazy. I was their main topic of conversation. And suddenly I was like their favorite person. They loved me, except for my sister, who was like, where are you? Who are you? Why are you acting like that? You're not my sister. What is this therapist telling you? Why are you acting so weird? And so I stopped talking to my sister. Because everybody else thought I was amazing. Amazing. I got 200,000 followers in social media. I was a celebrity. People would stop me in airports. Like literally everyone loved me, except for my sister, who was like, why are you acting so weird? She was completely right. Like completely right. And then, like you said, what happened was I had a really bad burnout, but it started that I stopped being able to speak. So I completely lost my voice. I got super, super sick. And then I thought I was depressed because I lost my voice. And then I couldn't like make any social media content, which was like how I was making my living. And so I like kept trying to do things to go back to masking, and I couldn't do it anymore. It's like the spell was broken. And it took me 3 years to realize what had happened was I learned how to mask. And this is the thing that I want to say about masking in the CAT-Q, like no matter what your scores or your sub-scores are or whatever, is like if you don't feel like you're yourself, that is burning up your energy in some way. I did it in this really concentrated way.
You totally did it the autistic way.
With monotropic focus.
Yes.
But even if you're masking a little, now that's not to mean don't mask, because I still mask sometimes, but if you switch it to being a conscious choice, you get so much of that energy back. And that's like the biggest thing is it's almost impossible to take the CAT-Q, because if you're masking well, you can't see the way you mask unless it just happens to check those boxes. But you are doing it if you feel like so exhausted from faking it all day. It shouldn't feel like that.
First of all, a side note, I can't wear headphones. They give me a headache. Even the fact that I have a ponytail right now, I'm surprised I don't have a headache, because whenever I put my hair up in a ponytail, I get a headache. I cannot have pressure on my head. I have the way I am with my family, the way I am at work, and the way I am with certain friends that I went to school with versus the way I am with the friends that share the same interests as me. I do think that is a light bulb for me when you said that, because I do somewhat know when I'm turning it on and off. But at the same time, do I know which one of them is really me, and could I be that around everybody? Is it any different than neurotypicals who have different things and different interests? Like, what is the autistic part of the masking, I guess? Because I will say, you said you were like a handful. If I think about when I was growing up, what were things that I couldn't do that to me were part of my autistic traits or whatever, is if someone had a pet and my friends had a slumber party, I could not relax. Like, I would never go lay down if a cat or dog would walk in the room while I'm sleeping. So I would have to like figure out a way to ask my friends to make sure the animal is locked up in a different room or the door is closed to the basement where we slept. So I would know absolutely the pet's not going to come down. But that didn't always happen. And I would flip out. Like, I could not stay regulated. Or one time I slept at a friend's house, and for whatever reason, I needed to have the light on. I think I was still like a teeny bopper. So now I sleep pitch black. But at the time, we argued for like 20 minutes about keeping the light on in the hallway. And this family friend's daughter was like, no, it has to be pitch dark. And I was like, I can't sleep then. I can't sleep. And then eventually, like, I just persist and persist until she did it my way. And I think that's in the way I was difficult, is that I was inflexible with certain things. But with other things, I would just go with the flow to just not make a fuss. I don't know. Turrell, thoughts?
Here's the thing. When I get older, I realized that, listen, not everyone is going to understand your autistic traits, and I will be honest, since this is on a podcast, as an autistic adult, I live on my own now, but at first I lived with roommates. And for the most part, I got along very well with them. And I think that's why, like, when my parents put me in those in public school, like at such a young age, when with the inclusion classes, like they felt like I would be more comfortable in that environment, and they were right.
Wait, you think
um,
they were right?
they were right. Yes, putting me in those inclusion classes actually helped a lot.
You
Huh?
don't think being in those inclusion classes made you, I don't
At
know, act
first,
a certain way that maybe wasn't the truth of who you are in order to fit in, or
At first, I did act a different way. I would do certain things that would catch some people's attention, and I don't want like I never wanted to do it, but it's just like when I was a kid, it was hard to control. Like I would do this with my
sure.
um, and sometimes I still do that, and so like this, but also
Well, see, what I would say when you say like, and sometimes I still do that, the way that you said it has this tone of like, and that's wrong. But I'm like, why? I mean, assuming that you are not being disruptive, you're not doing it, I don't know, in the middle of church or something. Like, why not stim freely?
right, well,
Like for me, I find stimming really like emotionally regulating. If I'm emotionally regulated, I'm much less likely to yell at someone or have a meltdown or lose focus on something I'm working on. Like if I'm studying, I will often be stimming while I'm reading. It like helps me stay focused. So
Okay, you know what? I have a question though. What do
yeah,
you define as stimming? Because I know, like, my son, when he's excited, will flap his arms. Like, right now, while you guys were talking and you said that, I noticed that I'm going like this, rubbing my
that's
new
stimming.
nail polish. Is that stimming?
Yeah.
Bite my nails nonstop.
Same girl. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
All that stuff. And honestly, the dude who was driving me crazy, who was whistling all the time, I am sure that was a vocal stim. I didn't know that. And there are other things that he could have done and we could have done with the duct work. And I could have, unlike you, I don't mind wearing earphones. So I could have gotten earphones. Like there's a million, I could have
And
gotten a white noise machine. Like we can accommodate each other if you A, feel badly about stimming, or B, suppress it, right? So either of those two things is going to suck up your energy and resources that can be used towards more productive work or more love-filled relationships or more joy. Like that to me is wasted energy that doesn't need to go to those. There are some times where you will probably want to suppress a stim for whatever, like let's say you're in court. It would probably be better to not stim unless you can stim quietly or something. I just remember having my hand hit out of my mouth so many times. Like even not even just as a kid, like for my mom, I have as an adult had adult friends like get your hand out your mouth. Like
I
get your
have.
hand out your mouth. Like yeah, I've been backhanded as a 40-year-old more than once. And it's like, dude, I promise you, it is bothering me more than it's bothering you. Like it's my mouth, it's
Or
my
even if
hands.
it's not, it's like I'm not sticking my slobber on your face. What do you care?
Right. I'm not putting my fingers in your mouth. The alternatives for me, like when I'm biting my nails, are like complete emotional regulation, dysregulation, meltdowns, leaving the room, quitting, suicidal ideation, as crazy as that might sound. Like I can distract myself from looping and repetitive thoughts by focusing I'm biting my nails. Like, let me worry about, there are, I'm sure, alternative behaviors that might be harm reductive if, your nails are bleeding, which mine very often are.
My dad's always cracking little silly dad jokes, and he's so fun, my dad. He said, and I'm sure he's ADHD, but anyway, he said to me and my brother, you can you can pick your friends and you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your friend's nose. Because I remember being little and he'd be laying in bed on a Sunday morning or something. I would crawl into bed or Saturday or whatever, and I would stick my fingers in his nostrils. I just had that memory right now. That's kind of an autistic thing to do. If I think about my son, he would try and stick his finger in every hole. I totally never even thought of that since my diagnosis until you just said, and we talked about sticking, you said, I'm not sticking my fingers in your mouth. And that reminded me of what my dad said.
The first time I heard that phrase was when I was watching a cartoon on Cartoon Network. You guys probably don't know this, but it's called The Grim Adventures of Billy and Mandy. And so that was the first. Yes. So yeah, this is me growing up in the 2000s watching a show like this. Anyway,
I bet
so
Kyle knows it though.
yes. Anyway, so I heard that phrase for the first time at the end of one of the episodes. Like, you can pick your friends, you can pick your nose, but you can't pick your friend's nose.
Okay, something else, Angela, my neurotypical friend that in high school and stuff, and then into our 20s, she would say to me, Daria, you always find the strays. Because I'd always have the group of friends that I grew up with, and we were still friends because we grew up together and we always hung out. And then I'd always have these fringe friends. And I think back and I'm like, oh, they were totally all neurodivergent. And my group of friends thought they were weird. They were weirdos. And why is she hanging out with those weirdos? Oh, because they were neurodivergent and I related with them, I guess. But it's so funny when you think about that.
I
Like,
have my same collection of strays for sure. For sure. My challenge to people is to really look at ways that you are not being authentic or true to who you are. And also, by the same token, ways that you are, like picking up strays, you is probably still who you are today. It's like gathering the neurodivergent people in every group around you. So that is where you will find joy and energy. And especially as things in life are challenging. So whether it's a health challenge or a relationship challenge, the more you're masking, the harder those challenges will seem. And identifying the ways that you're trying to be good, the ways that you're trying to behave. If there's anything that over and over again you've heard, don't do that. Really ask yourself, wait, is this bothering someone? Is this picking someone else's nose? Like, is this bothering someone else? Or is there a way that I can just accept that I'm someone that does this, bounces my knee all the time? Because you are allowed to do things your way. Obviously, don't hurt someone else. But if you're not hurting someone else, there's no right way to behave. That is made up.
I guess it's about just, like you said, consciously knowing, am I going to have to pay for being myself or expressing myself in a certain way? When it comes to the cost of your well-being, I think is the point you're making.
Well, especially for autistic people, because the difference, you asked this earlier, what's the difference between autistic masking and just like, because everyone masks? When non-autistic people are masking, they are trying to make a certain impression. They're trying to present a certain image. That's impression management. And of course, like, we all do it, but with autistic masking, we are surviving bullying or that job or whatever by pretending to be a different person. We're actually pretending to be a different person. We're pretending to speak a different way. So when I learned how to mask, how I spoke changed. my vocal register, the rhythms, my facial expressions. Like I make a lot of faces when I talk. I learned how to not make those faces and how to talk in a completely different tone because this is how neurotypical people like to talk and be talked to. They don't like the up and the down and the in your face and the big eyes. They like the very calm. And I did a lot of small talk. They like small talk, so I wouldn't talk too long about any particular topic. So all of that's just pretending to be a completely, it's like acting. Like if you went to work as an actor and you were, I don't know, pretending to be Hamlet, you're going to do that for 4 hours with breaks. You're not going to do that for 12 hours a day with no breaks. That's not a way to live. So non-autistic masking might be, weird example. When Hillary Clinton was told she was too masculine, like when Bill Clinton was running for president, and so they put her in a pink hairband. She was like a badass academic who went to, Yale Law School, whatever. And they put her in this like little girly pink hairband. And we're like, okay, girl, I got you. So I think it's when you are judging yourself on who you are as a person, that is like programming very like poisonous thoughts all day long. It's just little things and that's fine, but it's about the compound interest your soul pays for pretending to be someone you are. That compound interest is like not meeting the person you were supposed to spend your life with when you could have met them. That compound interest is not meeting your best friend who was the weirdo because she didn't see that you were also a weirdo. Like that compound interest is taking the job at the bank, but hating it and dying of a heart attack at 42. Like our life expectancy is 58 years old, the average life expectancy. And masking is a huge part of that. All day long, pretending to be someone else has a physical cost on our health. And that shouldn't surprise us. So if you can even identify, like you did earlier with like rubbing your nails, if you can identify those things and think, like, if it doesn't bother you that you do it, it's fine. But if you're like, oh, I wish I didn't do that. If you could just drop that story and keep the stimming, it's fine. Even about your biting your nails. I'm just someone who bites my nail. There are worse things I could do.
There's so many different aspects to this, and we just touched on it. Turrell, any final thoughts?
Again, I think the word masking really opened my eyes to everything that I thought I knew that I now know a lot more today. So because of that, I was able to have like even more conversations related to my upbringing, like with my parents, again, that was definitely a term that I did not grow up knowing, but it's a term that I'm glad that I know about now because obviously I wouldn't have known that I would have done a lot of that growing up. So that's for sure. And not only that, I'm actually looking forward to see to like helping others learn more about this term as well, especially those who were on the spectrum like us.
And my grad school advisor's area of specialty was impression management, which is pretty funny. And when I think back to it,
that is very funny.
Yeah. Angela, thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been a great conversation, and I've heard so much about Turrell. It was nice to get to meet you. So I appreciate you having me on your show.
Turrell is one of the most good-natured people I've ever met, and I love that about him. And because he came into early realizing he doesn't have to pretend to be anybody else, I think that true good nature comes through, and that's what I love. So he's definitely not masking that. But thank you so much, Angela. I'm a huge fan of yours, the podcast and everything, and it's really opened my eyes so much. And that's why we did the last podcast on the 10 pillars. So Good luck with your continued success with your podcast and bringing education and awareness to other autistic.
Yeah, and I have a new podcast that is launching on Halloween. So it should be out hopefully when
Right
this
about
show
when
comes
we
out
air this. Yeah.
or close.
Right.
So the new show is called the Late Diagnosis Club. So we're still doing the Autistic Culture podcast, but we are doing interviews with people who are late identifying, self-diagnosed, medically diagnosed, and just hearing a little more about how they figured it out and how their lives have changed since they figured it out. So people who have known for a decade to people who found out the day before my interview. So very exciting collection of guests. And I'm really excited about the new show. So thank you.
Me too. And I actually purchased 3 or 4 items from your merch yesterday because the email came around that you have new merch and stuff. So I bought the tank top that has the brain with the super gear.
Oh,
and
high-powered engine, sticky gears.
Yes. I'll put links to all of that in the show notes. Our next episode, episode 5, Turrell, we have Miles Kredich as our guest. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Now, we both met Miles at ICDL's DIR conference in New York City early last year. And at that conference was the only time both Turrell and I met our late colleague Kashina Holder in person, which we are both so grateful for. So that is our Kashina moment for this, episode 4.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Angela. Thanks, Turrell. See you next time.